evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, March 10th. We begin tonight with Mark Carney's landslide victory in the Liberal leadership race. Mr. Carney beat Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gold, and Frank Bayless by capturing 85.9% of the vote. In his speech to the party faithful, Mr. Carney announced his government would reverse the consumer carbon tax.
I am a pragmatist above all. So when I see that that's not working, I will change it. So my government will immediately eliminate the divisive consumer carbon tax on families and farmers and small and medium-sized businesses. And we will stop the hike in the capital gains tax because we think builders should be incentivized for taking risks and rewarded when they succeed. Canada needs more of this type of change. Change that puts more money in people's pockets. Change that makes our companies more competitive. Change that builds the strongest economy in the G7.
Mr. Carney also used his victory speech as an opportunity to specifically call out U.S. President Donald Trump, accusing the president of trying to weaken Canada.
There's someone who's trying to do the opposite. There's someone who's trying to weaken our economy. Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living. He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed. And we won't. We won't. I am proud of the response of Canadians who are making their voices heard and their wallets felt. I am grateful for how our provinces are stepping up to the fight, because when we are united, we are Canada strong.
Mr. Carney addressed Mr. Trudeau's retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. and said that Canada's tariffs will remain in place until the U.S. can demonstrate that they are committed to free and fair trade.
The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada. And my government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect. And until they can join us in making credible and reliable commitments to free and fair trade, as Chrystia did. Yeah.
And Mr. Carney thanked the outgoing Prime Minister for his service to Canada.
Prime Minister Trudeau, my time doesn't permit me to recognize all your accomplishments, so I'll speak at a higher level. You have combined strength and compassion every day as a fighter for Canada. You have led us through some of the hardest challenges that this nation has ever faced.
At the same time, you have transformed Canada. You've transformed it. You've lifted hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty by moving reconciliation forward and by defending freedom and democracy here and across the world. Prime Minister, I think I am speaking for everyone here when I thank you for your hard work. As Ella Grace said, your hard work for your leadership and for your service to our great country.
And in his farewell speech to the Liberal Party members, outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said freedom, democracy, and Canada, quote, are not a given.
And make no mistake, this is a nation-defining moment. Democracy is not a given. Freedom is not a given. Even Canada is not a given. None of those happen by accident. None of them will continue without effort. The world is looking to see what Canadians will do. So let us not dwell on all the great things we've achieved over the past 10 years. Let us aspire instead to achieve even more over the next 10 years and the decades to come. Let us remain steadfast, defiant, and united. And let us not just think about our party, let us prove our love of country. As your leader, as your Prime Minister, I have done my level best each and every single day to help build a country that stays worthy of all Canadians. I've done it for Xavier, for Ella Grace and Hadrian. And I've done it for your kids too. And I've done it with you. And although you'll always find me alongside you, cheering along, their future and your future is now in your hands. Merci, mes amis. Merci pour tout.
His daughter Ella Grace Trudeau introduced her father to the stage and says she is looking forward to seeing less of her dad in the news and being able to just see him more.
Conversations with my dad about the difficult situations I've lived through, and he never failed to make me feel better. He listened, and more than that, I knew he heard me. He understood me because he lived through all that. The only difference is that back then there was no social media. Imagine constantly seeing your dad or even news about him as you scroll through your feed. I gotta say, I'm looking forward to seeing more of him at home and less of him online. But I would never trade the last few years for anything. Dad, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud to have seen you fight for our country, for what you believe in, for what we in this room believe in.
Prior to the Liberal Leadership Convention, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre held a rally with over 2,000 people in London, Ontario, and took direct aim at Mark Carney over his alleged conflicts of interest.
So now our Liberal friends, after they've caused all this damage, are going to pull a sneaky trick tonight. They're going to try to get elected for a fourth term. By replacing Justin Trudeau with his economic advisor, Mark Carney. Carney's advice drove up taxes, housing costs, and food prices, while he personally profited from moving billions of dollars and thousands of jobs out of Canada to the United States. Working for Trudeau, Carney made Canada weaker and poorer. Working for himself, Carney made the United States richer and stronger. And for the first time in our history, Canada will have a sneaky prime minister with millions of dollars of financial interests that go directly against our national interest. And make no mistake, Donald Trump will have a big smile on his face as he exploits all of Carney's many conflicts to attack Canadian workers and Canadian jobs, but we Conservatives won't let either of them do it. We will put Canada first.
All right, stay tuned. Up next, Ontario Premier Doug Ford enacts a 25% surcharge on energy exported to the U.S.
That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans.
Leading to the announcement of Mark Carney's win, former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien took to the stage to reprimand U.S. President Trump. Mr. Chrétien ripped into Mr. Trump over tariffs and threats to Canada's sovereignty, warning that Canada's long and fruitful relationship with Americans was falling apart because of his continued hostility.
The world has lived for 80 years with a rule-based order that has brought us peace and prosperity. It has enabled the United States to be the strongest, the most powerful country in the world. It has allowed all of us to sleep well every night. And now, Donald Trump has decided to throw it all out the window. We are going to be living very difficult time, but I'm very confident that the next Prime Minister will work with the premiers, the leaders of all the political parties in the House of Commons, and allies around the world to stand together to meet the challenges that Mr. Trump is creating for the whole world. And perhaps, speaking of the president, it is time for a little history lesson for him. Probably does not realize that in 1776, Benjamin Franklin spent a year in Montreal trying to convince the people to join the American Revolution. And he was told by the Francophone, "Non, merci."
This morning, Ontario Premier Doug Ford followed through on his threat to enact a 25% surcharge on energy exported to the United States, explaining that he's also willing to increase the charge if tariffs are still on the table.
Until these tariffs are off the table, until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario will not relent. We will not back down. Pausing some tariffs, making last-minute exemptions, it won't cut it. We need to end the chaos once and for all. We need to sit down, work together, and land a fair deal. A deal that gives businesses the confidence to invest. A deal that gives workers the security they need and deserve. Until then, Ontario will keep up the fight. We will apply maximum pressure to maximize our leverage. That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans. Let me be clear. I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
And after the announcement, the Premier was asked if the U.S. states who rely on Ontario power can end up finding energy elsewhere.
Is there a chance that these U.S. states find someone else to supply their electricity? Is that a possibility?
I guess anything's a possibility, but they wouldn't be buying it off us if they could buy it off a U.S. state. we have to also build up our storage capacity, and we're working along with other provinces, be it Manitoba, which I always say Premier Canoe is an absolute champion, so is Premier Legault, and we're all working as Team Canada. So we're going to continue increasing our energy because we're going to need it. We're going to need it here in Ontario and to our neighbors. But wouldn't it be great if we get through this and we can sell more energy, more critical minerals to our U.S. friends and allies down there to make the AMCAN fortress even stronger? So that's what we're looking forward to working with our colleagues in the provinces and in the U.S. states. We have to get through this tariff threat.
And in an interview yesterday, Mr. Ford told CBS News that Canada is the United States' most dedicated customer. And if the tariffs remain, Ontario would ramp up their ad campaign in the U.S., highlighting the cost of Mr. Trump's tariffs.
And we're going to ramp up the ads. We spent tens of millions of dollars, but now the ads are going to be a little different. They're going to show, before he was elected, and then when these tariffs come, and if we don't get a tariff deal, they're going to be assembly lines shut down, jobs are going to be lost, unemployment's going up, and inflation's going up. As a matter of fact, inflation's going up right now because of the uncertainty. Again, I don't want to do this. We didn't start this fight, and neither did the Americans. The president started this fight.
So if I'm hearing you, you're saying you're going to run attack ads, basically, against what he's doing in the States.
Well, I wouldn't call them attack ads. I'm going to call them information ads.
Okay.
And they're going to inform the great people of the United States, how it could be, and having two great nations, and how it might be if these tariffs continue to go through. As far as I'm concerned, it's unacceptable. So let's avoid these tariffs. Let's sit down and let's hash out a deal, and let's put this behind us. There's more problems around the world, all over the place, than worrying about Canada.
President Trump is dismissing business concerns over the uncertainty caused by his planned tariffs on a range of American trading partners and the prospect of higher prices. Mr. Trump is not ruling out the possibility of a recession this year amid imposing and then quickly pausing 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico.
Let me stay on the economy for a moment, because there are rising worries about a slowdown. You've got the Atlanta Federal Reserve saying we're going to have a contraction in the first quarter. Look, I know that you inherited a mess, and you said that the other night.
I've only been here,
but are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition, because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time. But I think it should be great for us. I think it should be great.
In the interview with Fox News Channel's Sunday Morning Futures, he acknowledged that his plan could affect U.S. growth. And later last night, he was asked on Air Force One about that Fox News interview.
Where are we? Are we just about? We're just about ready to land.
Are you worried about a recession? Maria Martiramo asked you, and you kind of hesitated.
I'll tell you what. Of course you hesitate. Who knows? All I know is this: we're going to take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money. I'm telling you, you just watch. We're going to have jobs. We're going to have open factories. It's going to be great, and the plane is landing. And thank you for a lot of good questions, okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
However, when asked on NBC's Meet the Press, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick immediately shut down the idea that the U.S. could face a recession.
Anybody who bets against Donald Trump, it's like the same people who thought Donald Trump wasn't a winner a year ago. Donald Trump is a winner. He's going to win for the American people. That's just the way it's going to be. There's going to be no recession in America. What there's going to be is global tariffs are going to come down because President Trump has said, you want to charge us 100%? We're going to charge you 100%. And you know what they say? They say, no, don't charge us 100%. We'll bring ours down. We'll unleash America out to the world, grow our economy in a way we've never grown before. You are going to see over the next 2 years the greatest set of growth coming from America as Americans. You saw it, 1.3 trillion of new investment coming in America. Think of all those jobs. And remember, each trillion of investment in America is 1% of growth GDP. So Donald Trump is bringing growth to America. I would never bet on recession. No chance.
The president of a union representing auto workers says that Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada will fix what he calls a broken trade system. United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain told ABC News the tariffs are a huge factor in fixing America's broken trade system, which is in need of drastic reform.
Do you think that it's possible that Donald Trump might just be the president after those long 3 decades you just described? He might just be the president at this time to bring back or help bring back manufacturing jobs to the United States?
Well, look, I'll say this. The election's over. Donald Trump is the president, and we want to get to work to fix the problems that are wrong with this country, with our economy. And the American people expect that. They expect leaders to stand up and lead. They don't expect us to sit back, and they don't care about politics. They don't care which party somebody's from. They care about solving their problems. And so that's one thing Donald Trump has done. He's acknowledged the USMCA didn't go far enough. And so, there's an urgency now to fix this problem, and that's what we're going to work on. We're working with the administration now, and we'll see where it ends up. But I will say this. Name me one president in the last 25 years that's talked about doing these things and trying to fix this broken system.
Coming up after the break, we spoke with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois about how Canadian farmers are bracing for China's retaliatory tariffs on canola, pork, and other food commodities.
China is very smart when it comes to geopolitics. They will pick the right target. They will pick the right time. It's not a coincidence that they decided to actually issue tariffs on the weekend that Canada was appointing a new prime minister.
Canadian farmers are bracing for what could potentially be a big hit from China's sudden retaliatory tariffs, taking aim at canola, pork, and other food commodities. The president of the Canola Council of Canada is characterizing the tariffs as prohibitively high, and the fallout will be felt across the industry. Beijing announced their tariffs on select Canadian farm imports in response to Canadian duties taxed in the fall against Chinese-made electric vehicles, as well as steel and aluminum products. Dalhousie University's Dr. Sylvain Charlebois joined us for more on the impact of China's tariffs.
It's big, and it can be bigger. I think when you actually read the statement that came out of Beijing over the weekend, there's still an open door to future negotiations. China is very smart when it comes to geopolitics. They will pick the right target. They will pick the right time. It's not a coincidence that they decided to actually issue tariffs on the weekend that Canada was appointing a new prime minister. They did it. They could have done it way before. Tariffs implemented by Ottawa was actually done in October, many months ago. So they could have done that many months ago. They didn't. They waited until now, when knowing that Canada is experiencing some diplomatic entanglements with the United States, our closest ally. It used to be our closest ally, and now. I think that China knows that more and more China will be seen as a different opportunity for Canadian farmers. So they're hitting us at the right time, the right way, so they can get our attention. But there is an opening here, so I suspect that they're just leaving options open for the next government.
Now, many political commentators have pointed out that Canada's response to these tariffs from China has been radically different than our response to the threat of U.S. tariffs. We asked Dr. Charlebois for his view on the response gap.
Well, it's really interesting to see the entire nation mobilizing against the Americans due to tariffs that are 25%. And of course, we still don't have any, we don't see any tariffs yet. It's been postponed, but at the same time, we see China implementing tariffs on Canadian goods, but central Canada doesn't seem to be paying a whole lot of attention. And we know that tariffs were implemented to protect the EV and battery sector in Canada. It was a very protectionist measure to protect Ontario jobs and jobs in Quebec, which leads to many to think that this was just bad trade policy from the get-go, aligning ourselves with the Americans. And at the time, people understood that. but the person we were working with is no longer the tenant in the White House now. So it's a totally different landscape, and I do think it really will entice Ottawa to look at this very, very differently moving forward.
U.S. President Donald Trump plans to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico on April 2nd, in a move that threatens to spark a trade war. Goods from Canada and Mexico will be slapped with a 25% charge. Now, Canada has announced tariffs in response, but one question remains: what industries will be impacted the most? Canadian oil and gas producers and manufacturers of primary metals, plastics, and motor vehicles are among the top industries most exposed to potential U.S. tariffs. If sweeping tariffs are implemented, it could create significant challenges to communities in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and New Brunswick. I'm now joined by Brendan Caldwell, director at Caldwell Securities Limited, to discuss what industries will be hit the hardest by Trump's tariffs. Brendan, thank you for joining me today.
Well, Teresa, let's do this thing. It's a trade war, as they've said, is actual war by other means. And while we're not quite at that point yet here in Canada, we're still a little bit bemused by it. I think it's getting serious.
Now, how might the recently imposed U.S. tariffs affect Canada's energy exports and the oil industry?
Well, making the price of anything more expensive does or should reduce demand for it. I think the bigger thing, though, is that with inflation being such a big concern, both here and south of the border, apparently in the U.S. they've got some situation with eggs. They really should have an egg marketing board. But with energy being such a big component of everything that is done in the economy, I think an even greater upward pressure on inflation by raising the price of energy through, call it tariffs, but it's taxes by another name, will have not only impact on the energy industry, but on the economy as a whole. Now, the flip side might be, having persecuted the energy industry for the last 10 years, it might be that the government of the day now wraps itself in the Canadian flag and says, no, what we meant was, and makes the domestic pressures on the energy industry a little bit less by doing things like making it easier to drill, explore, and to get our energy, our natural gas and oil, but particularly natural gas, to blue water. We need more pipelines. We need more capacity to sell our natural gas to the markets that really, really need it, like Europe, but particularly Asia, where they'll pay multiples of what we get from the US for the same commodity. So I do think that it can mean that Canada becomes more in control of its own destiny as an energy exporter, the way other exporting energy countries have, energy exporting countries have done.
And considering the integrated nature of the North American automotive industry, what disruptions could arise from these tariffs, and how might they affect Canadian auto parts manufacturers?
The disruptions are already happening, because whether or not the tariffs go through, and I actually thought they were starting in March. I know your intro, they said April, but the fact that I'm confused probably means everybody else is confused too. And that's the point. I think that's actually the intention of what's being done. You may say Trump is this or Trump is that, insane or what have you else, but the chaos that is being created is straight out of Game of Thrones. Chaos is a ladder. And I think the intent is to keep everybody guessing as to what his true motivations are. But the effect from the auto business and every other manufacturing business, I have a very good friend who's an engineer that makes switches. He is Canada and US operations. And the production has been very much moved forward in these parts, just in event that the Trump tariffs are introduced. So already you're getting forward demand. So the Canadian economy has actually been boosted these last few months in anticipation of the tariffs. So whether they go through or not, it doesn't matter, because everybody's already pre-ordered what they needed and pre-delivered what they needed. So there's likely to be a slump in the second and third quarters, irregardless of whether the tariffs go through or not.
Now, last night, Mark Carney won the Liberal leadership race. And on the topic of the economy, do you think that Mark Carney is the right person to be dealing with Donald Trump?
Well, only time will tell. What did he get? Like 86% of of the vote. I think Kim Jong-il doesn't get that high a percentage. So we'll see what comes of it. When everybody agrees on something, it is often problematic. He is a bright feller, but his manifesto, his Das Kapital values, wasn't exactly favorable to be seen. He's certainly a smart man with accomplishments in the central bank, but being a central banker and being an actual politician where you actually have to be conscious of the will of the people, at least to some extent, they're two very different jobs. And dealing with central bankers and dealing with personalities like the President of the United States, look, the Canadian Prime Minister has one freaking job: to get along with the President of the US. Brian Mulroney understood that well, and we've benefited for 30 or 40 years as a result of that. The Prime Minister of the moment, Mr. Trudeau, he didn't think that was important, and here's where we are with these tariffs. If he and Trump had got along during Mr. Trump's first presidency, I think we'd be in a very different spot today. So you can talk tough, but ultimately, with any enemy, you eventually have to sit down and do a deal. And I think that's more the case than most with Canada and the US right now.
Now, we do just have about a minute left, but Ontario Premier Doug Ford has proposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., and those will be in retaliation to the tariffs. He actually made that announcement today. Now, what impact will this have on Canada's economy and U.S.-Canada trade relations?
Well, if we actually did what the Americans or Mr. Trump's proposing to do, and that is use tariffs to balance the budget or use tariffs to reduce income tax, then maybe. But it'll be interesting to see if the president's going to put a 10% tariff on U.S. energy, and then the Ontario Premier says, that's not nearly enough. We need to tack another 25% on top of it. It's better than cutting off supplies altogether, because I think that'd be a pretty quick way to have U.S. Marines at the Darlington nuclear power plant to secure America's energy supply. But I think premiers negotiating with presidents, that's the position that Trump was looking for, and belittling our prime minister by calling him a governor. I think that's it is not an equal fight, and I think it may be done for grandstanding rather than commercial or even good political reasons. So,
Brendan, sorry, I do have to interrupt you. That's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much. Tens of thousands of people packed into Mexico City main plaza on Sunday to celebrate President Claudia Sheinbaum's efforts to get the U.S. to postpone tariffs on many of the goods from the country.
Nos reunimos en esta plaza hermosa, corazón político de los Estados Unidos mexicanos, para congratularnos, porque en la relación con los Estados Unidos prevaleció el diálogo y el respeto, y fueron levantadas las tarifas o aranceles que se estaban aplicando a productos que exportamos hacia el vecino país. Somos naciones en igualdad de circunstancias. Es un logro de todas y de todos. México es un país libre, independiente, soberano y democrático.
While holding and waving Mexican flags, the crowd yelled, quote, "Mexico is to be respected," as they cheered on Ms. Sheinbaum. Donald Trump postponed the punishing 25% tariffs on many imports from Mexico for an additional month, saying that Mexico has made progress cracking down on drug smuggling and illegal immigration. A new poll says that not many Canadians are enjoying Donald Trump's repeated pitches for Canada to become a U.S. state, although some interest is rising among Conservative supporters and those living in Alberta. The Leger poll says that just 9% of Canadians want Canada to become the 51st state, while 85% do not. Support for the idea is highest in Alberta at 15% and lowest in Atlantic Canada at just 3%. Saudi Arabia will host talks between the United States and Ukraine after an argument erupted during Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the White House. The capital city of the oil-rich kingdom may seem like an unusual venue, but Saudi Arabia has been positioning itself as an ideal location for possible peace negotiations in recent years. Saudi Arabia is also hoping to hold the first face-to-face talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump. Prior to the meeting, Mr. Trump expressed hope that a deal could get done.
Looking at a lot of things. We have big meetings coming up, as you know, in Saudi Arabia. That's going to include Russia. It'll be Ukraine. We'll see if we can get something done. I'd like to get something done. A lot of people died this week, as you know, in Ukraine. Not only Ukrainians, but Russians. So I think everybody wants to see it get done. We're going to make a lot of progress, I believe, this week. And let's see what happens with the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. I think you're going to have eventually, and maybe not in the distant future, you're going to have some pretty good results coming out of Saudi Arabia this week.
Are you going to?
Well, I think they will sign the minerals deal, but we want them to. I want them to want peace. Right
How do
now,
they show that? How do they show they want?
Well, right now they haven't shown it to the extent that they should. I think right now they haven't, but I think they will be, and I think it's going to become evident.
Israel says it is cutting off its electricity supply to Gaza. The move is to press Hamas to accept an extension of the first phase of their ceasefire. That phase ended last weekend. The full effects of the shutdown are not immediately clear, but the territory's desalination plant received power for producing drinking water. Sunday's announcement comes a week after Israel cut off all supplies of goods to the territory of over 2 million people. Daniel Rubenstein, former advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, joined us to explain the justification for the drastic move.
It is absolutely wild that the state of Israel was providing the Gaza Strip with any amount of electricity after the October 7th massacre, when the Hamas government made very clear that its intention was to annihilate the state of Israel and the Jewish people. The fact that Israel was supplying any electricity to Gaza is a remnant of a period of time 20 years ago when Israel used to control the Gaza Strip and then left the Gaza Strip. When Israel left the Gaza Strip in 2005, it left the Gaza Strip under the control of the Palestinian Authority government, which lost power in a civil war to Hamas 2 years later in Gaza. So from 2007, Hamas is the government of the Gaza Strip, but Israel did not want the innocent civilians in Gaza to pay a price for the fact that the Hamas terrorist army took over the Gaza Strip and became the government of the Gaza Strip. So Israel's electrical wires continued to go to Gaza, and electricity was provided from Israel to Gaza. Either it was paid for by the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, even though it had been kicked out of Gaza, or it would be paid by the state of Israel, or countries like Qatar would come in and pay. On October the 7th, 2023, when Hamas invaded Israel, there were 12 electrical lines going from Israel into Gaza. So after the invasion, when it was very clear that the government of Gaza and the people of Gaza, many of whom participated in the October 7th massacre, that what had happened before, what had existed before, where Israel was supplying electricity to Gaza, this could not continue while Hamas was waging war and holding Israeli hostages in its underground terror dungeons. The electrical line that existed until this point was supplying a desalination plant in central Gaza in the town of Deir el-Balah, which is under the control of the Hamas government, which is an area where Hamas is holding hostages and starving the hostages. Israel is looking for ways to pressure the Hamas government to make the decision to give up the hostages and allow them to go home before they die in Hamas captivity. The criticism of Israel's decision to cut the last electrical wire into Gaza is made most fiercely by those people who do not think that Israel has any right whatsoever to target the Hamas terrorist army, which committed the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. We are in a very difficult situation where the Hamas government has decided to pursue its war, to continue holding hostages, and Israel must find new ways to pressure this Hamas government to release the hostages. The consequences in Gaza are the responsibility of the Hamas government of Gaza. The people of Gaza should turn to their government if they want to have a better life in Gaza and ask that government to end the war that it started, to give up power, and to release the hostages. The people of Israel want to live in peace with their neighbors, but they cannot live in peace with a neighbor whose philosophy is that Israel must be destroyed, and it's completely insane to be sending the Hamas government of Gaza any ability or means to continue its war. We are in month 17 of this war. We need this war to end, and Hamas needs to get the message that it needs to end, and that needs to come through pressure through all available means.
South Korea's military says North Korea has fired several ballistic missiles into the sea. The launch Monday happened hours after South Korean and U.S. troops kicked off their large annual combined drills, which the North views as an invasion rehearsal. South Korea did not say how far the launched missiles flew. Australia's Prime Minister has cautioned that the fallout from a vicious tropical storm over the weekend is far from over. Parts of two states, Queensland and New South Wales, remain surrounded by dangerous floodwaters today. One person was killed and several others were injured after heavy rain lashed Australia's east coast. About 200,000 homes and businesses are still without power. And Guatemala's volcano of fire is erupting. Authorities have evacuated nearly 300 families while warning that another 30,000 people in the area could be at risk. The eruption began overnight, and there is no immediate report of casualties. The roughly 3,800-meter high volcano is one of the most active in Central America. Toronto police say a seventh person was injured by gunfire in Friday night's mass shooting at a pub near Scarborough Town Centre. In an update post yesterday, police said that the total number of injured people remains at 12, but a seventh person was grazed by a bullet and not by flying glass. 3 suspects remain at large after they entered Piper Arms pub and indiscriminately opened fire as diners were celebrating the pub's opening night. All 3 shooters fled in a silver car. Pope Francis issued a message on Sunday thanking volunteers for the miracle of tenderness they offer the sick as he continues his recovery from double pneumonia. For the 4th Sunday in a row, 88-year-old Francis didn't appear for his weekly noon blessing, but the Vatican distributed the text he would have delivered, in which the Pope thanked all of those who cared for him and others. Doctors reported Saturday that Francis is responding well to treatment and has shown a gradual slight improvement in recent days. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on our social media handles. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the News Forum YouTube channel. Good night, Canada.